March 21st. Thank you. Meeting of the Traffic Safety Work Group. And first, as a preliminary matter, my name is Arthur Gaspara. I'm the chair of the work group, and I'll do a roll call of members. Please confirm that you can hear Mr. Sylvia for the DPW.
Yep.
Chief Casper.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Chief Granson.
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning, Art.
Mr. Rowland.
Here.
Mr. Burns.
Here.
Thank you. Ms. Mooney with us.
I'm here.
Thank you. Just as a preliminary matter, the open meeting of the traffic safety work groups being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023. Meeting is being both audio and video recorded, and please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and anything that you share from your screen may be captured by the recording. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please be recognized by the chair. Please take care to identify yourself in meeting minutes, and each vote in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And with that, we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, which is actually we first have public comment for any items that are not otherwise listed on the agenda. You could wave your hand or speak up. Virtual hand, not seeing any. So we'll move on to the first official business, which is the safety action plan to review the crash analysis prepared by Kittleson and Associates, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr.
Mike,
Chair.
do you want me to screen share, or do you want to?
I can do it if there's an issue, I'll ask you to kind of jump in if my connection is a little choppy. And let me know if it's projecting okay.
It's not on. Oh, here it comes.
Okay. Thank you for that. And just so the committee knows, the Nantucket was awarded a federal grant for Safe Streets and Roads for All. That grant was to be used for developing safety action plans for not just Nantucket, but also Martha's Vineyard and the Franklin County region. The three rural regions in Massachusetts, and we're benefiting from this just so we can compare our data amongst the rural regions and then compare that statewide. So it's really helping try to understand the safety issues in the communities by seeing how they're relative to other like communities, especially another island community and rural communities, as well as statewide. And there is oh gosh, it's kind of hidden now, but Alex Garbier from Kittleson Associates is also on the call, I hope.
I'm here. I'm hiding in your boxes, I'm sure.
There you are. Yeah, once you start sharing your screen, it gets a little difficult. But anyway, moving on, just to let you know, this is the organizational structure. I'm serving as the project manager for this effort, along with the original transportation planner for Nantucket, Beth Giannini, who now works in the Franklin County region, and Bill Vino in Martha's Vineyard. At the very bottom of this chart, there are different stakeholders and traffic safety. I'm using this committee as our stakeholder group because of the composition of this committee, and I'll get into that here in a second. Going to the next slide. This is a very complicated schedule. This Gantt chart shows all the different tasks that are involved with the action plan development. This effort is to conclude at the end of next summer, so in September of 25. And that'll ultimately have not just a report, but a prioritized lists of projects and strategies to improve safety in Nantucket and the other partner agencies as well. And between then and now, we'll develop a high injury network using existing crash data that Alex will walk through here in a moment. And later this summer, we'll have more of a public outreach effort where we'll get some input from the community to help inform the prioritization and prioritization of projects and what are the actual strategies that we should be using to help improve safety in our community. And going to the next slide. And again, just quickly, this first task is to identify a high injury network, looking at historic trends and using predictive analysis efforts. Alex is going to walk you through all this, but I'm just showing you here that we are trying to map this and have it be more of a geographic analysis, spatial analysis of crash data, as well as the types of data that we're collecting. And again, sorry, this is kind of a sloppy slide, but at the very top in blue, there's the composition of this work group, which is very good because the guidance that we get from Kittleson is that we should actually partner with local public departments such as DPW, fire, police, and the composition of this group is pretty good in that effort, but that we're not going to be limited to outreach just to you all. We're going to try to go out to the larger community and have participation as well. So with all that said, that was a very high level kickoff to what is the safety action plan for Nantucket and what the scope of work is for that. Now that I've gone through all of that, I'll hand it over to Alex and he'll walk you through these about 12 slides of maps of crashes, where they are and their types and severity. So Alex, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's great to be able to talk to this group. I think just like context setting here is, I'm transportation engineer, planner. I've worked for 5 or 6 years doing plans around this context. Started doing a lot of work in California where I was previously located. And some of that work has actually flowed very well into these SS4As. Just as an evolution of those, one of the things that I'm really excited about is the fact that kind of the SS4A grant process really requires this type of interactions. It's really easy to say, safety being kind of a thing that transportation professionals and staff are focused on, but everybody in this group is very much a part of that conversation. And it's really good to be able to start this process with this larger group, because really the collective success is going to come from kind of the broad knowledge. And really there are engineering solutions we'll talk about, but there's also a whole bunch of strategies that are really not engineering oriented, are more kind of either education, enforcement, and really building a kind of practice of culture around safety. So anyway, that's a little context setting here, why I'm really excited to be able to talk to this group. What you see here in front of you to start off with is probably the most complicated map in some ways, or at least the hardest to diagnose. What we are showing here is reported crashes between 2018 and 2022. Is a 5-year period. That's kind of our standard that we use for thinking about crash history. The reason for that is really if you go further back, we start to get into context where either roadways may change, but also kind of practice of how the transportation infrastructure may change. I think everybody on this call is probably, 10 years ago still, Uber and Lyft basically didn't exist. Our cell phones were not quite as powerful as they are now, or nearly as distracting. And so really that's why we're looking at kind of a 5-year window, is just a recognition that things change. And we're looking at kind of the 5 years as a kind of snapshot. So during this period, there's about 1,023, or I guess there was exactly 1,023 reported crashes in Nantucket, 19 fatal and suspected severe crashes. We use the word suspected as opposed to just severe crashes, or at least we try to, is because a recognition that when we talk about the injury levels and reported crashes, there's just some uncertainty. It's difficult to identify the severity of a crash in the moment as it's occurring. And so we'll use that word suspected as just an acknowledgement of kind of some of that uncertainty. So anyway, this map right here is simple in the sense that every point represents a crash. It's difficult in that it's hard to understand patterns within this because there's a lot of dots and making sense of them is really hard. And so what we do for the analysis is try to aggregate crashes in 2 ways. The first is a little simpler, so I'll mention that first. The first is basically intersection related crashes. So crashes where they occur within 250 feet of an intersection. And so those are basically, we look and try to aggregate up at intersection points where the number of crashes that occurred within 250 feet. That may include crashes that weren't necessarily specifically related to the intersection, but it's a kind of a simplification that is very useful for trying to understand what's happening at an intersection, so that when we go later in this process where we start trying to identify engineering solutions, we're able to say, this is the type of engineering solutions that are appropriate for an intersection. The flip side of that is then we take all the crashes that happen more than 250 feet from an intersection, and we look at how they are concentrated along roadways. With Nantucket, what you'll see, right, is the kind of urban core. There's a lot of intersection crashes, but as we move outside, we're gonna have more roadway crashes as the kind of concentration of intersections becomes more dispersed. And just one final piece of context here is for intersections, what we're looking at is intersections of public roadways. We do recognize in Nantucket there's a lot of private drives. We're really trying to focus in on the kind of larger intersections created by the intersection of two public roadways. So let's, I guess we can go to the next slide here. We can start seeing the product of that. Oh, I see, yeah, sorry. I forgot the ordering here, no worries. So before we get into the screening, apologies for, we'll build a little suspense, is first just kind of talk about the types of crashes that we're observing. So on the left here, we see the crashes by type and severity. So this is the reported type of crash. What you'll observe here is, so we have the number one crash type is angle. Those are generally intersection related involving two vehicles. The second most common is single vehicle crashes. For those, we've split them out on the right side of the page to identify what the interaction is with. So single vehicle crashes contains a kind of multitude of types of crashes. And so we really want to split them out to understand what people are coming in contact with. The other thing I'll bring your attention to is the yellow and blue sub bars within this, which is to say, when we talk about Vision Zero type ideas or safe systems, we're really trying to focus in on fatal and severe crashes or even injury related crashes. That's not to say that a property damage only crash is not a very big problem and very disruptive to the people where it happens. However, what we're really trying to focus in on are crashes that involve someone getting hurt, and in particular, someone being severely impacted or, in the worst outcomes, a death. So within that, you have your there's certain crash types that there's a lot of crashes, some of which are resulting in more severe outcomes, such as angle or single vehicle crashes. We also just, want to bring attention to crashes that bicycle involved and pedestrian involved, which there aren't that many, but when they occur, they tend to have really severe outcomes. I don't, that probably is not surprising, but it is something to kind of think about with pedestrian and bike involved crashes. They just are a lot fewer of them relative to kind of your rear end, angle or single vehicle crashes, but where they occur, when they occur, the outcomes are generally, very unfortunate. I'm going to pause here and just the caveat I forgot to say at the beginning is please interrupt and ask questions if you have them as you go here. Part of this is I know we're going to be throwing a lot of information at you all at once here, and I certainly want to provide context and also just hear your thoughts. I certainly come to this conversation with we're providing some information here, but I know this group has a lot of information and knowledge that's going to help this process overall. And I do not want to come to this process saying I know everything. In fact, I know what's in the slides here, but I think the context and your local knowledge is really critical for making this kind of the long-term year and a half that's going to be really successful. So anyway, please feel free to jump in. If you raise your hand, I can't always see it, so just please come off mute and talk to me. We can go to the next slide here. So this is I'll say an unusual, but probably not surprising to you all. Oh, sorry, was there a comment? Okay. Unusual, but probably not surprising to you all. The summer months are the highest concentration of crashes. Very unique relative to kind of broader patterns across the country. But we do see kind of that real peaking of June through August for crashes. I think another thing that's somewhat unique is the degree to which the middle of the day, and this is on the panel on the right, where weekday and weekend, it's not unusual to have crashes be more common during the middle of the day. It's a little unusual to have that be true for the weekday as well. This is why we're talking about a little bit of unique context for Nantucket. The other thing I'll bring attention to is the number of crashes in the late hours of the day, kind of 1 to 4 a.m. They don't look particularly high on this graph, but if you were to normalize these patterns relative to the number of people on the roadways, and that is something that, where we're at right now in the analysis is kind of like the first level, but there's the potential to kind of do secondary analysis to further illuminate patterns. The number of people driving on the roads between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. is almost certainly much lower than during the middle of the day. And so most likely, if you were to normalize this based on vehicle volumes, those kind of late hours would really kind of rise up as being much higher relative to number of people. Again, it's not surprising, but this is the type of information we do want to still highlight, even if it's not surprising. And that can be due to, lighting, DUI, all sorts of, late night driving, being tired. Go to the next slide. So this is kind of where crashes are occurring. Major caveat, these are not normalized to roadway miles or number of intersections. That is something we are currently working on, but don't have completed right now. So this is just pure numbers. Where are there more crashes occurring? So starting on the left, arterial and collectors are lower as a number of crashes occurring on them than local roads. However, there are much more miles of local roads. And so that's why it is going to be important to us to try to normalize this based on roadway miles. On the right, we have by the reported intersection type in the crash reports, where you see here, what you see here is, T intersections is a very large percentage of total crashes, but again, those are also a high number of intersections versus there are very few traffic circles, and there are not that many four-way intersections as well in Nantucket. And so while those numbers are lower, those are much fewer sites. And then this represents the intersection crashes represents about 40% of total crashes. So 60% are not at intersections. Okay, so this is really big. It's too much. So I'm just gonna try to, the cheat sheet is on the left here. And so what we're trying to do here is looking at crashes resulting in injury. How does Nantucket compare to statewide averages? So where are the types of crashes that are more or less important relative to statewide averages for Nantucket? And so this is a useful comparison to try to understand and put in context when there is kind of statewide conversations, or if MassDOT's having conversations about how funding should be distributed, is thinking about what things are more or less important relative to what might be important at the statewide level for Nantucket. So so on the right, what you see here, and when you see the other two participants in this project, is in the leftmost column is the statewide average. What percent of crashes involving where there's reported injury have that characteristic? So if we look at the first row, 10% of statewide crashes result in a fatal or severe, versus in Nantucket, a slightly higher percent of crashes that occur result in a fatal or severe crash. And so on the left here of the page, I've kind of created the cheat sheet that I'm not going to read through, but you can really look into the details if you'd like. So there are fewer angle crashes being kind of a very common intersection related crash. Single vehicle crashes are a higher percentage of crashes in Nantucket. Where we see for pedestrian and bicycle crashes, we see where we have basically for Nantucket, there is about equal to the statewide average for pedestrian involved crashes. Bicycle involved crashes is quite a bit higher. So 15% of crashes involved where there's reported injury, 50% of them are bicycle involved in Nantucket versus only 3% at the state level. So we have side swipe, opposing direction. I think this is probably a product of some skinny roads on the island, are much higher in Nantucket relative to the statewide average. You also have more crashes occurring not at intersections, and a higher percent occurring at T intersections relative to statewide averages. Some of that is just a reflection of the roadway network that you have, but this can eventually help us try to identify what types of treatments can be ones that can be applied systemically across the island. So if we go to the next slide. This is looking a little bit more of time of day. As we noted, middle of the summer is just higher for Nantucket relative to the statewide averages. And then there's Saturdays tend to be higher relative to statewide averages. Lastly, and again, some of these are probably not surprising, but just helpful to have these numbers to reinforce when you say this is important to us. Drivers over the age of 64 make up a higher percentage of crashes and resulting in an injury or worse than statewide averages. Again, probably reflective of just the population and demographics of Nantucket, but that is also still useful for thinking about kind of where our priorities for thinking about safety issues. Okay, I guess I kind of jumped into this slide earlier in talking about it, but I'll just reinforce this. So we're going to look at intersection results, roadway results. Intersections are intersections formed by public roads. Where there's offset intersections, we consolidate them. Offset intersections are intersections that are basically like two approaches that are less than 100 feet from each other. So if you have kind of a main roadway coming through and two minor streets that maybe don't go directly into each other, but are just slightly off, that's called an offset intersection. They can have issues, but we've treated them as a single intersection just so we're really thinking about them as a single system. Roadway crashes, we're looking at crashes that are more than 250 feet from an intersection, and we evaluate them by looking at a mile segment of roadway and counting up the number of crashes along that mile segment, so that we're looking at kind of a stretch of roadway and thinking about the context of that stretch of roadway for whether or not, when we eventually start thinking about treatments, what could make sense along a longer stretch of roadway. Okay. There's two metrics that we're going to be showing. The first is relatively simple. It's just crash frequency. That is the number of crashes per year. So along at an intersection or along a roadway, how many crashes per year have been reported? The second one is where we try to include the severity. So considering that a fatal or severe crash is worse than a crash with only a minor injury, a crash with a minor injury is worse than one that's just property damage only. And so we want to basically put additional weight on those more severe outcomes. And so what we do is basically do a simple multiplication. So giving 10 times the weight for fatal and severe crashes and 5 times the weight for injury crashes, 1 for property damage only crashes. Okay, so we're back to these are all the points, and then let's see what they look like when we consolidate it. So this is the roadway crash frequency. And so this is where we see more frequent concentrations of crashes. The purple representing locations with more than 3 crashes per year. The dark blue being more than 2 crashes. So since we're looking at a 5-year period, greater than 3 means that there's been more than 15 crashes on that section of roadway during the time period. The dark blue means that there's been more than 10 crashes, 10 to 15 crashes during the study period.
Alex,
Yeah,
what is
absolutely.
that road off of Surfside Road that's purple? Is that Bartlett?
I believe it is Bartlett. Yeah, Mike. Yeah. And so, yeah, and what you'll see here with the roadways too is you can kind of see some of the urban kind of urban core commercial areas kind of disappear, and that is because those crashes are being aggregated at an intersection level. And so, really, where we're going to see here some of the longer roads that are really your connective tissue of the island. Okay. And so this is now where we are weighting it by severity. And so this, to me personally, is often a little bit more informative, because you can have situations on roads where you have a lot of, let's just say, there are places that often occur where there's a lot of rear ends, because there's just context. There's an intersection, people don't pick it up, and they run into the back of each other. A rear end is still a problem. I'm not trying to say it's not a problem, but generally people walk away pretty easily from a rear end. And so when we do this weighting, we tend to identify locations that are both where there are crashes occurring and where the outcomes tend to be worse. And that can often be due to either speed or context, right? Speed being the crashes are more dynamic when they occur. And then context being like, what does the crash look like when it occurs? So often like a curving road tends to have kind of worse outcomes because people are leaving the roadway and then they're running into something. Nantucket is more rural in nature, but there are still trees and there are buildings, there are fences, and people tend to hit things. And when they hit things, that's not great. Some of this is simplistic, but this is, so maybe I just pause here for the starting point, because I think this is maybe one that to me is hopefully what I want to hear from you is basically, does this resonate first, like as a resonation of like, yes, this makes sense to me. These are the locations that I think of. Or conversely, are there sites that you don't see that are not intersections, but kind of roadway where you're kind of surprised that you're not seeing them? That information is also useful. I'm happy to, if you put it in comments, I can take notes easily, but I'm also taking notes here if there are places that you would like to highlight.
And Mr. Chair,
Members?
Oh,
Go
yeah.
ahead, Mr. Burns.
yeah, Mr. Chair, if it's all right, I know we're introducing the data right now, and
Yeah.
I'm sure the conversation doesn't end today. So if you want to just absorb this also, we're happy to come back and revisit this and take additional comments at a later date as well, if that's for time reasons, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think if anybody has anything that jumped right out at them, they wanted to, but otherwise, I think that's a sound approach.
Alex, I just had a quick question for you.
Yeah.
This is Drew Patton, I'm Director of Public Works. These are weighted based on crash type and severity. And I may be stealing your thunder if this is part of the presentation after, but is there a weighted analysis based on traffic volume?
Yes, so this is something Mr. Burns has asked me a couple times about. So they are weighted only by the severity of the crash. So we're considering where they are relative to intersections, if they're roadway or not, but we're not considering the type itself. We're just considering what the most severe reported injury is. That's what the weighting is done. They are not normalized for volumes.
Gotcha.
And so this is something that, so there's kind of two components to this. One, when you start normalizing for volumes, you have a potential to overemphasize smaller roadways where there has been a bad outcome. So you could end up having a situation where there's very low volumes, but there was a fatal crash. Maybe you should be prioritizing, but you can't get in a situation where you're prioritizing smaller low volume roads with like a single severe outcome over a roadway that has more crashes, just by considering that. That doesn't mean it's not useful to look at it. So we are working to try to get that. One of the complications is having island-wide volume data is a little hard. We have access to a platform called Replica, which tends to generate volumes. The data is of mixed quality, but it is something we're looking into now that we have the results to try to see if we can get some context. And I guess, yeah, exactly. That's mine.
Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about it because especially on the last slide, but also on this one where you see Sparks Ave, Bartlett Road, Surfside, that is where the elementary, intermediate, middle, and high schools are located, and obviously very high volumes in what we call the off season. But that doesn't even change in the summer when school is not in session, but very much heavily traveled roads, and obviously same with Old South, Milestone here on this figure. So and as far as you were saying that you might kind of prioritize areas where you have really bad outcomes from crashes on very low volume, like traveled roads. I think that might lead to some, whether it be design or policy decisions, to address glaring needs for safety in areas where in my mind, I'm picturing we wouldn't expect those kinds of outcomes. That's all.
No, absolutely. And so one other thing that we will be doing is thinking about one of the things we are going to be doing as the next step in this process is what's called a risk ratio analysis, but it's really looking at roadway context of overrepresentation of certain types of locations. So one of the things within that is looking at proximity of sites to schools or other kind of nodes of activity we know are going to be places that bring people. And so that's something that will also be laid on top of this. And then like a really big caveat here that I just want to make sure is clear is like, the goal of this analysis is to help provide useful information for you all to be able to develop projects and go after grant funding. There's other goals too around kind of like a little bit more comprehensive, but really the thing that is, as we continue these conversations, the goal of like creating these graphics, that there is some degree of having them be useful for public communication, but there is really want to bring it back to also thinking about how do we, like you mentioned, how do we think about and build a case for necessary and useful projects. So that's helpful to have that feedback.
Thank you. Did you have anything further right now, Mr. Garbier?
There's 2 more slides.
ahead.
I know I've already taken up more than my fair share, but I think we've kind of covered. So this is what the intersection results look like. So you kind of transition more into the urban core, but also some intersections that at some of those major roads. And then if we go to the next slide, we see kind of where we're trying to normalize it to severity, so that we can kind of also think about it from intersections of where there are more severe outcomes for intersections. And then I think there's less. I think we have a next step slide, but questions there.
So, Mr. Chair, if it's all right, again, I'd like to use this group as a stakeholder group to kind of share information as it's being developed by Alex's team, and to bring it to you all for comments. And like I said, I'm going to use you all pretty much as a sounding board, and to kind of use this for to kind of proof the data, but before as we're sharing it with the public. And again, like Alex said, we do ultimately want to have like a short list of prioritized safety improvements that potentially could seek funding to implement, as well as other programs. I don't believe Nantucket has a Vision Zero policy right now, or the idea of a safe system approach when engineering is kind of a new thing that really hasn't been institutionalized in everything that we do. We have had efforts like Complete Streets, accommodating all modes and abilities with all of our transportation investments, ensuring that we have sidewalks as part of roadway projects. So this is the same effort when we do a roadway investment, just ensuring that we're picking the safest option when doing an alternatives analysis. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for that opportunity to have Alex run through these slides and share all this information with you. I know we get asked about it a lot of times at meetings, like what is the crash data? What does it look like? This effort is meant to make this easier so that we can all have something that's easily referenced when we make our decisions and talk about requests from the public.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you both very much for all your efforts, and we'll certainly keep this one bookmarked.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Anybody
Sorry
have
for going
any questions or points that they'd like to make at this time regarding this presentation? So I think we can, if you have anything that crosses your mind, please feel free to reach out, I think, directly to Mr. Burns, and he can pass that along to Mr. Garbier. And thank you again. Appreciate it. Take care. We'll move on to the second item on the agenda, which is Candle Street, to review the food pantry request to change the 15-minute parking space adjacent to 10 Washington Street to a loading zone. This is an item which we have had some discussions in the past. We have materials in our packet, and I see that we have Ms. Pitts here with us. Ms. Pitts, would you just like to start off with a little presentation of your the materials you filed and the need that you feel for this change?
Absolutely. I'm not sure, perhaps a loading zone is not the correct terminology, but I'll kind of present what we do, and then you experts can kind of weigh in. I'm not sure if you can see this. This is kind of the sign out front. The 15-minute is on top of the 2-hour parking sign, which I think is very misleading to anyone who parks there. The sign, unfortunately, the arrow points to the building. So I think it's open to interpretation. And then right below it is a 2-hour parking. So someone could just pull in that spot and assume it's a 2-hour zone. And I totally understand that. Our needs are pretty limited. And this is where maybe not a loading zone is the answer. We serve the public Tuesday through Thursday, 3 to 6 o'clock. I receive orders, deliveries once every 2 weeks on Tuesdays from Sun Island, where the pallets are offloaded, and then we take the food inside. The whole procedure takes about 45 minutes. then through the course of those days, there are points where we receive a Cisco delivery, or we do have a van and we have a offsite food storage where we move food back to the pantry. So best case scenario for us, I would believe, if we could say the spot is used for the food pantry from 11 to 4 for those 3 days, or if it's just possible to use signage, either, removable signage, to say this spot is reserved from 11 to 4 on Tuesday, food pantry only, and then I remove it and the signage stays the same as far as the town's concerned. I think we become a 1-hour street in the summertime. I'm not totally sure about that. I think that's correct. And I don't know, I think that changes June 1st, which doesn't really affect us. If any of our clients are picking up, obviously the pickup is much quicker than an hour. And typically many of our clients use the bus anyway. So that's really not the concern. It's the delivery. And a good portion of our deliveries come from volunteers, and to ask them to park down the street to offload sometimes hundreds of pounds of food, I feel like is asking an excessive amount, to make that easier and more efficient. So they're not tying up another parking spot that could be used for someone else for 45 minutes to an hour to come to me. So I think it's just a matter of efficiencies, that if we were allowed to use this spot when we need it, it would free up other parking, be more efficient for the food pantry, less impactful to other businesses on our street, which we really want to, be conscientious of our impact to those guys, and free up as much parking as possible for their business pursuits. That's really what we're looking for. So again, as loading zone per se, maybe that's not the correct terminology.
Thank you, Ms. Pitts. So this raises I appreciate the some of the alternatives that you've suggested. As you understand, the concern generally with losing any in-town parking for extended periods of time, and if that's going to go to the select board. And I think we mentioned this before, but again, we're advisory to the town manager, so we don't actually have regulatory authority to make these decisions. However, I think that this is the proper forum to try to see what we might be able to creatively come up with in terms of a recommendation. And something that we haven't really seen before, and I think will take a little bit of work in amongst, but I'm just going to put it kind of out there, follow up for discussion on your points, is the concept of temporary blocking, where you are authorized to, being that it's sort of a managed space and a managed operation, if you were able to put out signage and on an as needed kind of basis, how might we be able to accomplish that through the regulatory framework of the town and securing you that permission? And what crosses my mind is something similar to like a street blocking or sidewalk permit. And I'm just speaking aloud here and wondering, given that we have the chief and Ms. Mooney, might there be a way where sort of a permit on perhaps an annual basis that allowed you to do that might work? Where you had your own sign, and then you were, is it possible to, get that kind of authority granted, whether it's through the town manager's office or the select board? We could just refer that back to the town administration. And so that's just it seems to me that might be the best of both worlds. In other words, and I had one other question: is the food pantry a nonprofit?
Oh, yes.
So I presume that, but I don't like to, because I think there should be we have to be careful that there's not a precedent sort of that it's a private, when the granting of those kind of permissions would be to a private entity for a public, use of a public space, that there
Correct.
should probably be a basis of a justification. And I could see a distinction that, might be made on the basis of both the mission of the pantry, but also the nonprofit status. And so I guess open it up if anyone else had any thoughts on that. And Ms. Mooney, I would welcome your input if you thought that might be a mechanism or a path that, if it was supported by the group, might be doable.
Thanks, Art. It probably would be doable. I mean, we've had kind of blanket permits in the past. The one thing that could get tricky is because this is like in the middle of the day. I mean, Ruth is asking for 11 to 4. So you've got people potentially parking in that spot between 6 and 11. What if they're in there during their time? And then, and then she goes to put out her sign for the blocking. And there's a car there.
So what if it was, and again, I'm just for discussion purposes, what if the authorization was along that stretch of road, so that if that happened, in other words, you get one space that you could put signage, and ultimately you're ideally would try to get, the space closest. But you might have to use what's available. It's not a situation that under that kind of authorization, you're gonna, I think be able to call for, enforcement or towing. I would think, I defer to the chief, but I could see to, Ms. Mooney's point, it's sort of a logistical challenge, right? You can't put the sign out and expect to relocate somebody. I don't want to say boot, but, but if you had it signed under your authority, and then someone came and ignored your sign, you could call for enforcement. But I could see where that then gets challenging as well. And maybe this wouldn't work. I was just trying to, but that's really no different than if it was assigned loading zone, really.
And Art, I have a question. I know that 15-minute, and I put in all that material from prior meetings, just so you all had some background from 2019 and 2021. And I know in 2021, that's when the 15-minute parking space was instituted there. And I wonder if it's enforced. And Ruth, I get the feeling that it's not that much. And I'm wondering if the food pantry staff ever calls the police to request enforcement because people are parking there.
I have.
Okay.
Primarily in the summertime when, the in-town cops are around, which makes it easy, and I feel a little bit like a rat doing that. But, the parking is excessive. I mean, and again, I know the signage, I do believe maybe if the signage could be a little clearer, like the way, again, the one is on top of the other, and interpretively, maybe someone really is viewing that as a 1 hour spot, but there is no, like, the enforcement is minimal. And, quite honestly, I get parking tickets. So, I don't get it,
Is there any way that that space right there at the back door could be boxed out on the pavement? And this is more of a question for the DPW and Mike. We use white paint to box out certain locations like a loading zone, or like where the bike shops are able to put their bicycles out on the street. Like, is it possible to box out, to delineate a space on the pavement to make it more clear about where the space is? And I just wanted to say too, in terms of a blocking permit, I am the final signer on those permits. The ultimate, they're not valid until me or somebody from my office signs off on it, but it needs signing off from police, fire, DPW, and NRTA. And I would definitely like to hear from those representatives. I know we don't have NRTA here, but what their thoughts are on a long-term blocking permit like that. But I don't know. I agree with Ruth that the sign can be confusing. And maybe delineating a space could help with that.
Thank you. To that point, Mr. Silvio, what might do you have any suggestions about how the signage might be able to be clarified? In other words, could we do an arrow on the 15-minute, or a second arrow, a start stop, a box? Any thoughts that maybe that would be needed, even if it was, I guess, the temporary spot, but just sort of as we're trying to weigh what those ideas would be.
The box would be easy enough to do. The sign, the reason why there's an arrow on the sign pointing back, I know it points towards the building, but it means back, from there on, is there's not much other locations along that sidewalk to put other signs. Because otherwise you got those stores and the back door so close together. If I put them there, if I put it too close, it's gonna be blocked by the tree. If I put it down further, it's gonna be blocking doorways, because it's a pretty narrow sidewalk. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
why they're kind of spread out. They're not at every single spot. So that's why the sign is, I can put an arrow on the 2 hour, which we're in this picture, but it's 1 hour. I can put an arrow pointing to the right, and I can kind of tweak the sign a little bit, but a lot of times when I do that, they pull up and say they didn't see the sign because it's facing the road and not where they're getting out. That's, they're gonna make any excuse to get out of a ticket sometimes, so. But the box would be easy enough to do, and I can always throw an arrow on at least the parking sign below it.
Right. Just a question. If we were to box that out, would it be possible to put something like 15 minutes like in paint on the asphalt?
I mean, we'd have to buy a special stencil for it, but.
Yeah. Just
yeah.
thinking it's something like that can jump out the pavement markings, especially in some areas. Like I know I think we do in Wisconsin and some other areas where we put the words no parking. And there's also the pavement markings for the bicycle and pedestrians right across from the food pantry on Candle Street.
yeah.
Just wondering if we could do something to help make it a little just extra clear.
Ms. Pitts, would the sort of, if there was to be an authorization on a for the temporary blocking during limited times, and I presume if you're getting deliveries from 11 to 4, you're probably there earlier.
Yes.
And I'm not sure exactly how you would do it. Maybe you have it's sort of like what we've asked to be removed in other locations, which would be, like maybe there's a sandwich board type of a, plastic, type of a device that you invest in that says parking for food pantry only. And when your person comes, you go and you pull it in and then you put it out. And if we were to authorize it along that stretch so that you just have to make sure you get a spot and take it back in, might that be something that would work for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it as simple as possible. And, some our operation days, as I said, are Tuesday through Thursday. It's not always necessary to block the spot that long. That I don't need it specifically 11 to 4. When our delivery is done, we give the spot up. On Tuesdays, it's probably realistically from 1:30 to 2:15 or 2:30. And in the past, literally, I stand in the spot to hold it for the Sun Island guy. It's a little crazy.
It's like you shoveled it. Ms. Mooney?
I would like to speak against having a sandwich board because we are trying to eliminate those
sure.
more downtown. And I was thinking more along the lines of get yourself a large orange cone with like a 1 inch, not a 1 inch, a 1 foot square sign in red that you could, put inside the cone or mount on the cone that says food pantry parking only or something like that, that you
Even
could
better.
put in the space, and it's easy to take out, easy to put
Mhm.
out. HDC, I believe, doesn't have authority over signs that are less than 1 foot square. So that would eliminate the need to go to HDC for that. Just a thought.
Mr. Burns?
I was ready to make a motion just on what Erica just said. Right, and I'm going back, I do see that we had a recommendation that we made in 2019, that the food pantry seek a street blocking permit for, I think that this is exact operation. So I'd almost make that motion again.
Can I just ask for clarification? Would the 15-minute parking stay? But they would also get a street blocking permit?
Uh, My thinking is that 15-minute parking would go away and we would avoid marking the roadway with something that's, very permanent, and it would take a lot of effort for what's less than 10% of the time. You need this for a very short, small window of time. So
Mhm.
it seems like that's the most flexible and less impactful way, if you can get all the signatures on the permit, I suppose. And the cone that Erica's describing, if that can be actually developed. But Mr. Chair, I'd make that motion that the food pantry seek a street blocking permit with a 1 foot by 1 foot sign on a cone
And removal of the 15-minute space.
and removal of the 15-minute parking space.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second that.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Burns, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Sylvia?
Is it,
Aye.
Chief Casper?
Aye.
Chief Granson?
Aye.
Mr. Rowland?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you, Ms. Pitts. Hopefully this smooths it out.
Thanks so much.
so
Oh.
Ruth, what I'm
Yep.
gonna do is email you the form.
Okay,
You'll fill it out and then we'll send it around for signatures. And then you will work on getting a cone and some sort of sign that you would put in that space so people would be very clear.
awesome.
Okay.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You just
You're
made my summer that much less stressful.
With that, we will move on to item 3, which is step lane to remove the request to remove an on-site parking space.
I will note that I did send invitations out to everyone in advance of this meeting, but I don't see Mr. Vacy here.
Okay. So we discussed this last time, and we were going to reach out to the neighbors, and we don't have anybody here. Should we just continue that again just in case, or does anybody want to suggest any action here? Sounds like we'll hold it over then by unanimous consent if anybody doesn't want to jump onto this one. And with that, we'll move on to 11 Lincoln Ave, which was to review the request to extend the no parking line. We also had discussed this and then wanted to get a little bit more information. Mr. Burns, did you have anything further on this one?
Yeah, I apologize that we're talking about this now because I visited the wrong location when we talked about this last. I did look at this location and I'd make a recommendation to support the request.
I would second that. I would second that.
So the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the proposal to extend the yellow line at 11 Lincoln? So, Mr. Sylvia, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Rowland,
Aye.
Chief Casper,
Aye.
Chief Granson,
Aye.
Mr. Burns,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Thank you. That'll take us to the side path stop sign removal. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is also informational, just to share this. I'm going to share the screen if that's all right. Just to let you know that there is a town bylaw that provides protections for bicyclists and pedestrians at crossings. And as a result of that, there was guidance to remove stop signs and stop bars on path approaches to intersections. And there had been some effort from the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee a couple of years ago with my predecessor, Patrick Reed, to come up with some initial areas to remove stop signs. And those areas are highlighted in a table that the DPW director and I have agreed to visit to verify those recommendations. We have not done that just yet, but on this slide, you'll see essentially the work that we would be looking at. I mean, there's stop bars and stop stencils on those approaches and stop signs. The idea would be to remove those and again, mark a crossing with some signage for shared use path warnings so that the vehicle traffic knows to yield to all users of the path so that they have the protections in the crossings. So again, the packet does include a recommendation from BPAC. This does reference the town bylaw. I'm scrolling down. The text on this is impossible to read, but just to let you know, this is something that's in our town bylaws. So that part of it isn't necessarily being discussed. It's essentially this these actions at various locations that again DPW and I still need to visit, and I guess the idea is to bring a recommendation to this group to recommend that that's actually a safe strategy. And that's all I really have on this for right now. I don't know if Drew wants to elaborate on this, or if Mr. Chair, you'd like to have some discussion on the bylaw itself and whether we should be moving stop signs from those approaches or not.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. I'm afraid I have some concern that this is gonna make things less safe, but I understand that the bylaw was adopted. Seems like we're encouraging or perhaps giving bicyclists a great, maybe a false sense of security, but I understand they don't stop there now. But it's probably a bit of a no-win situation.
If I may, yeah, I shared your concern, Mr. Chair, especially at certain locations, which is why Mike and I discussed going out to kind of understand where the bylaw may be applied without negative effects. But we definitely share the concern that allowing cyclists to continue through roadway intersections without the stop signs may contribute to essentially the presentation we saw earlier highlighted the frequency at which vehicles and cyclists collide. And my fear is that number will go up. But there may be some opportunities to apply the bylaw without taking those steps backwards from a safety perspective.
I would just like to say that I agree with the last two speakers, and I would like to just voice my objections to removing any of these markings and lines for stopping bicyclists. We saw in our first presentation on this meeting, which to be honest was surprising to me, the number of accidents that we do have on the island. And I think that this will decrease the level of safety. And I would like to be on the record as saying that I do not agree with that.
I almost wonder if, it really should have both. Right? Like the bylaw was adopted to sort of get rid of the stop lines on the bike path and add them to the roads. But it seems to me, if you really want to promote the greatest level of safety, that it's, you should have the stop lines for vehicles and for bicycles, recognizing the challenges of that and the how that might impact the mobility of the bicycle type commuters. And then of course, not to go into another rabbit hole, but the e-bikes I think are a big part of I think some of the concern, having that the bicycles or e-bikes, on the bike path are moving at such greater speeds coming through there. I have to agree. I just find it concerning from, our charge of traffic safety to support the removing of traffic controls that would hopefully lessen the chances of collisions between the two classes of users. Mr. Rowland?
Yeah, I'm actually, as a biker, I'm actually in favor of this because I think it removes any confusion at these intersections. The vehicle people think that the bikers are going to stop and they don't have the need to respect them coming through, and they all come through anyway. My only question is, instead of removing the stop signs or stop imprinting on the bike path, could that be replaced with something that some other language that says like slow or intersection or, you know, caution, or just something as a warning for the bikers to be aware that there's an impending concern at that location?
I guess I wonder, I mean, every intersection is going to have a warning. I mean, if you're a user, you should be aware that, you know, that happens. I mean, is it really necessary to install a warning, I guess, for every intersection? I see your
Mr.
point
Chair,
on the confusion. Mr. Burns?
I'm sorry, I can't find the raise the hand if I'm sharing my screen. Uh, Newer path designs that have been implemented recently, you might have noticed a yellow line separating the two flows of bike traffic on within about 100 feet of the approach to different intersections. That's on the Hummock Pond Road bike path and a few other paths. That yellow line that appears on the approach to intersections. That's generally been the I guess the design to alert a user of the path if there is a condition change that you're coming at some kind of intersection. The yellow line, along with the detectable warning panels that with the cement concrete rather than the hot mix asphalt treatment, that gives another indicator that there's some kind of threshold that is about to be crossed. Those also have had stop signs, the 18 by 18 stop signs in the past. We haven't done the site visit. We have some recommendations here that need to be thought through in the field, but that would probably be to Mickey's point, the treatment that I would probably recommend is those yellow line approaches and then some kind of detectable warning panel, something like this, just to alert users of the path that there is an intersection without actually labeling it stop. And so that could be a strategy that we recommend.
Ms. Mooney?
Erica, you're muted.
Sorry. Mike, this bylaw was brought forward by a citizen warrant article, correct? Is this one of
Yeah.
Ian Golding's citizen
Yes.
warrant articles? And has BPAC reviewed this? And has there been any talk about a repeal of this bylaw once the understanding of what this really means?
No, the committee, BPAC actually supported this and wanted some kind of next steps from me on how this is getting implemented. So that's why I'm here now, and so why we're trying to set up meetings with Drew to actually do these tasks. But we're actually having this discussion now of whether this is actually a supported bylaw or not. I know I have my concerns with it, but again, this is I don't want to implement my own policies. I think it's good to kind of have these discussions in a group setting,
Okay,
since
thanks.
it actually is an approved bylaw. I mean, that was approved. I mean,
Mhm.
it wasn't a lot of attendance at that meeting, but it still passed.
You had said though, this is really just informational for us, or I mean,
Yeah, just to
Great.
introduce this, and to see if I mentioned some design treatments with the yellow line and the detectable warning panels. This shows some stop sign removal strategies that would take place. I wanted to share that and have that discussion with you all. There's nothing more granular than that until we actually do field visits and coming up with some better schematics than what's being shown right here. Because I don't think it's a simple exercise of removing a stop sign and walking away from the intersection. There needs to be more because there is a lot of concern with safety. whether there's the continental crossing striping that's put at this location, yellow lines along the approaches of the path, other signs for vehicles so that they know that to yield right of way to path users. There's going to be more than just what's being shown here. So I'm just sharing that with you all, having a little bit of a discussion. It sounds like there is an appetite to do something more than just what's shown here, and let you all know that we will be coming back with another recommendation.
Okay, we'll stand by then. Does anyone have anything further? Hearing none, we'll move on to the review of the speed sign summary. Mr. Burns. You're muted.
Sorry, it's contagious, Erica. There's this summary sheet in the packet. I was if anybody had any questions about the data that was collected from the speed feedback sign, happy to answer those. But I did share this with the DPW director and the police chief. There is a feature with the speed feedback sign where it did collect data. You could access that data remotely using a dashboard. So we could do a data inquiry 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. I thought it was helpful. We did get good speed information, volume information, and we are pursuing a purchasing of a permanent counter to put at that same location, as well as 6 traffic counters at other locations that will not have a speed feedback feature, but will collect data very similar to this report here. We'll have volume information, speed information, and the 6 counters that we'll be installing will actually collect some level of classification data, but that's going to be very high level of showing you a small, medium, or large vehicle. Large being an 18-wheeler, small vehicle being a passenger car, and medium being some kind of vehicle in between. So no more detail than that. So again, Mr. Chair, happy to answer any questions about the data that was collected at that location. 81st, it's a posted 25-mile-an-hour zone there at the end of Milestone Road, right near the intersection of New Street. 85th percentile that was actually collected was 43 miles an hour. That's indicative of an issue. I will note that the blue pie chart with the light blue with the dark blue is showing that vehicles actually did slow. There's about a 75% of the vehicles that did enter that area did decelerate in that area. Again, the 85th percentile speed that was recorded was 43. If you look at the reports, it might show some the faster vehicles. There were some pretty astonishing speeds at this location that in the middle of the night. So,
Thank you, Mr. Burns.
Thank you.
So is there a 25-mile-an-hour sign before that establishes the start of this zone before this sign? There is, correct? So that it's not, this isn't at the start of the zone, this is within the zone?
Correct. Some distance back west of this location, there is advisory signs of speed limit change ahead, 25-mile-an-hour zone ahead. I don't know if that's 500 feet or exactly what the specific distance is, but there's some warning to the public that there is a 45-mile a change from 45 to 25. And this sign captures those speeds within about 500 feet of the sign. So it does capture those within the zone. That could be indicative of why the speeds are so high, because that is a transition area.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I'm just thinking that it seems if this sign is actually where the zone, the actual zone transition occurs, that, you know, I just think that should be taken into account when considering this data. Now, all that being said, I'm impressed by the amount of data that is collected and provided from something that you know, when we reviewed was much, you know, more about sort of an alert warning type of device. And then here we have all of this. I just didn't, you know, maybe I missed it, but I just didn't realize we would actually get so much information from that device, and it's really impressive. But I only mentioned the other pieces. That's what occurs to me. If this is at the at the start of a zone, or the actual change point, you would anticipate that the speeds are going to be higher. I mean, maybe not all the way at the speed of the other zone, but anyway, that's just my observation. Anybody else? Any thoughts or comments on this?
And Mr. Chairman, it's okay just to briefly note the features of that speed feedback sign, and we're excited to install a permanent version of that. But we can change the settings on the sign to where if people wanted to see how high they could get that number, playing a game and doing bad habits, we can turn off that display for speeds above, like, say, 55 miles an hour, to where there's no like trying to see how big the number can get. What another feature is that there is a strobe feature, a flashing feature, to where you can set when that actually is activated and deactivated. Speeds over, say, 50 miles an hour, you used to get the strobe flash feature. If they decelerate to get below, say, 35 miles an hour, closer to the 25, that strobe turns off. So there is some feedback to the driver to let them know that, oh my gosh, I'm well above the speed limit. And then the strobe turns off. Okay, I'm within an acceptable range, but it's still telling me I'm still high. And then by blinking, and then as they decelerate. So it's a good alert for the, I guess, drivers. Probably for enforcement, not as helpful, because again, it's a transition area. But I think that is helpful to alert the public that is a transition zone, and to provide some feedback to the driver to let them know what their speed actually is. So anyway, thank you for letting me elaborate on that.
Thanks. Mr. Celia?
Yeah, that sign that's before that is the large 25-mile-an-hour thickly settled sign. It just says that it's 25 mile an hour thickly settled. It's before the water company. And below it, it does say town-wide unless otherwise posted. But it is technically the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit sign. So right there is where it's supposed to start. At least that's when we installed them. That's where the 25-mile-an-hour was supposed to start, was at that sign.
Thank you. Mr. Patton?
Yeah, just to answer your question, I think the distance from the beginning of the 25-mile-an-hour zone to the speed feedback sign is about 300 feet. So the sign, this electronic sign is not at the beginning of the zone, it's 300 feet.
Okay, thank you.
In the zone. I suppose we could have the discussion about maybe whether we change that distance. Obviously, we're not going to change the beginning of that speed zone, but we cited that it's at the end of the bike path, and there's a crosswalk and other signs in the area. So kind of basically, I would say mostly for line of sight and without having too much sign congestion. That's why it was cited where it was. But if we think a greater distance may be more beneficial, then we could certainly revisit that.
Thank you. I wasn't really suggesting a relocation, as I was trying to weigh the data in my own mind, sort of of that. But thank you. Okay. So I would ask Mr. Burns, though, please do keep us posted on the installation locations and data as they come online. I think it'll be certainly of interest to this group.
Will do. I'm very excited about getting the new toys and getting new data to look at. So
thanks. If there's nothing further on the speed feedback signs, we'll move on to Pleasant Street and Williams Lane. Mr. Burns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we're getting a little late on time here. I'm happy to run through the slides, or I'm happy to answer questions about the slides. I'm sure a lot of this material may not be new to a lot of the members, so I don't need to go over anything that you're already aware of. Just to let you know that there were two different design alternatives for Pleasant and Williams. One option was to maintain two-way traffic. The other option was to maintain one-way traffic. The benefit of a one-way was that it accommodated both bicyclists and pedestrians, and more of an array of users, and had less property impact for property and utilities. Whereas the two-way actually maintained traffic flow. And I'm going to scroll down to this, what I'm reading off of. the two-way feature actually preserved traffic flow and provided more options for the driving public, but it was at the burden of bicycle users who would not have a dedicated facility and would have to share the traffic lane with vehicles under a bike route condition. So, Mr. Chair, this has been shared with the Bike and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They've made a recommendation to pilot a one-way option. That recommendation was shared with the NPDC, who has reviewed that request and has taken no action. It's also been shared with the Select Board or introduced to the Select Board. They have not taken any action. So again, this is not something that probably needs to be decided today, but at some point, depending on the actions of NPDC and Select Board, might want to be aware that there is a recommendation to pilot the one-way alternative, since it does have the virtue of accommodating all users with a minimum amount of property and utility impact.
Thank you. Ms. Mooney?
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that when Mike presented this to the NPEDC and the Select Board at a joint meeting, afterwards, I let Mr. Burns know that we have a number of projects, infrastructure projects going on within the town that impact Pleasant Street. And because I think the original idea was to try to implement the pilot program either this spring or next fall. And I just wanted to go on record and say that our infrastructure projects will still be impacting Pleasant Street next fall. So this wouldn't even be a consideration at the earliest until maybe spring of 25, potentially, if at all.
Thanks. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments, or discussion on either of the alternatives or the pilot?
Mr. Chair,
I'll just reiterate, you know, my position is that I don't support the one-way flow or the piloting, but that's not a motion or to you know, we'll just I don't think if anything's needed now and everyone can have it, but I don't support it for the reasons that has previously been stated. And I did provide a letter, not as chair, but to the NPDC and Select Board on that, expressing that opinion. So nobody has anything further on that.
Just to
bike
elaborate
safety.
on the scope, Mr. Chair, if that's
Sure.
all right, just to let you know that the reason we're talking about the alternative is just to being diligent about complying with the complete streets alternative. The design contract that we had with the beta group was just to do a preliminary design phase. Part of that preliminary design was to look at a couple of different alternatives. So this is being diligent and just trying to look at you know, all the different varieties per the complete streets policy. But you know,
I did
just to
have
let you
one
know
other
why
thing.
we're looking at alternatives.
Yeah, no, and I think that's good planning. I did have one other question which had to do with the base plans that were used. Was there actual survey there in that those underlying plans? Would the town be able to identify encroachments from those plans? And, you know, would it perhaps be beneficial to have an initial review using those survey plans to identify encroachments such that, you know, it might be a help with interim you know, improvements in terms of providing additional buffer, if you will, whether it's for bicyclists that are still on the road, but they're not pushed out as far due to, you know, hedges or fences and that sort of thing. And I understand it's a relatively narrow corridor. But I'm wondering if we might be able to make use of those plans. Is there any low-hanging fruit, I guess? Is there a big hedge or two? Anything like that we could look at?
Short answer, yes. This on one slide there does show the property line and
Yeah.
hedges surveyed out. So yeah, you can scrub the survey plan to kind of pick those out. So if you'd like to, I can share those plans with you if that's.
Yeah, I mean, the
helpful.
ones that you have on the screen right now, are the ones I've taken notice of in the past that I think would be a big help to have removed. And I don't think we need to wait for a big project. So often we don't have that kind of data. And so I would suggest that for that particular hedge, I mean, that's the one that jumps out at me. I don't know if there's any other ones, if so that it's not, no one feels that we're singling them out. But what I think I've long suspected right there is true. And having that hedge that is right to the edge of the asphalt, I think shouldn't be there. I think that should be a grassed shoulder, and so that just all of this just doesn't sort of go away, if you will, right? So what benefit can the town and the public recognize as a result of the town and Beta having done all of this good work? You now have the ability to identify encroachments within that limited right of way. And whether it's I guess the question I would have is the best approach to that in terms of sending, identifying which encroachments. I mean, if you wanted to send me the plans, or if you had time and wanted to look at it, then maybe come up with a basic list that could be sent to town administration and DPW to go through their standardized process for that type of a situation. I think that would be a good thing to do.
Okay.
Anybody else, any thoughts on that? All right, let's, does that work for you, Mr. Burns? Make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll send those to you. I'll have a little bit of a look at it myself, share the information with Erica, and we can continue the conversation.
Okay, thanks. And the bike safety campaign.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just scrolling down to those slides now, and I've shared this with the police chief who I believe just left the meeting.
Yeah, she put a note in the chat saying that she had to duck out for another meeting. She left at 11:50.
Okay. And just to let you know that I've been coordinating with the Chamber of Commerce, the town's communications staff, Land Bank, Nantucket Conservation Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce, if I didn't already mention the chamber, on maybe just some strategies to one, encourage wearing bike helmets more often, and then two, share the regulations on e-bikes. And then three, to use bike registration as the medium for actually providing that information. So one, we do try to, we would like to use bike registration. There's a local requirement, local bylaw that all bikes operating on our streets should be licensed. That goes back a number of decades. It's not really done as much diligently anymore. I don't know if there are a lot of licensed bikes on Nantucket, but the idea is to, one, bring that requirement to the light and incentivize it by one, perhaps making it, right now it's a $2.50 charge to register bicyclists. Talking with the police chief, there's some appetite to waive that fee and have that be a free exercise. What you would also get with that would be some Nantucket themed stickers and a bike safety brochure, which we're working with the Culture and Tourism Office on correcting. So to encourage the wearing of bike helmets, and this is an old slide deck, I don't have the picture of the actual bike helmet. Shoot, I don't have that up. But the idea is that there would be a Brain Bucket Nantucket sticker, a 2-inch sticker that with a Nantucket silhouette and a year on there, very similar to the oversand beach permits that people get for their vehicles, but this would be a sticker with a year on it for a helmet, and that would be a collector's item that would entice people to go visit the police station or the sheriff's office to register their bicycles and get the sticker for their helmets, and then actually wear their helmet to display the sticker as a something that they're proud to do. Along with that bike helmet sticker, if a bike's happen to be an e-bike, the idea would be that a classification sticker, a more bold sticker than what the manufacturer provides, would be helpful to let the public know that the class of a bicycle, whether it's class 1, 2, or 3. As you may know, Nantucket does permit class 1 and 2 bicycles on bike paths. Those bicycles are limited to a 20-mile-an-hour top speed with pedal assist. However, class 3s are not allowed, and those are the higher performance e-bikes. They go up to 28 miles an hour. So at the very top of this slide, you see what the manufacturer provides. Here is a yellow sticker. It's a 2-inch wide sticker with incredibly small font that's impossible to read. The idea is to do something on the right, actually have a bolder sticker with a class on there. And I actually do have a sample of that. The class 1 and 2 with the white background and black font shows the class 1 and 2. Conversely, the class 3 a black background. So they're, the idea being that they're easy to see from some distance. So that would be the treatment for the e-bikes. And again, there's a bike safety brochure. Kevin Marshall from the police department had developed a bike safety brochure. You can see from the brochure the images that it was very, very text heavy. We wanted to correct that and use the Culture and Tourism's pocket map to provide more safety tips in a very succinct manner that are easy to read by the public and understand and hopefully abide. So that's a work in progress. And again, just to illuminate the actual rules of the road, this is a very verbose set of rights and restrictions for bicyclists. I don't know if anybody would ever read all of these bullet points to understand them all. So we've actually gone through the effort of refining those down to a manageable set of bullet points, and that's been shared with Culture and Tourism. So, Mr. Chair, just again, informational to share with you all that there has been some diligence to encourage wearing bike helmets so that we can, if there is a collision involving a bicycle, that the damage is minimized and everyone can walk away from that. And again, change the culture of the community to respect more of these safety best practices, like wearing a helmet, using hand signals to change lanes, and educating e-bike users that class 1 and 2 are permitted for a lot of areas, but not the class 3. And no e-bike is actually permitted on natural surface trails for like land bank trails or Conservation Foundation trails. E-bikes are not permitted there at all. The effort is to kind of spread that information to the public so that there's more awareness of it all. So thank you for letting me run through all those strategies.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Burns. I hope this feels a step in a right direction. Really good. Anybody?
And as soon as I can share those sticker images, they are fun. Our communication, Florencia is very talented. It's cool and fun as the helmet sticker can be. Like it is pretty cool to look at.
It's a hip sticker.
Exactly.
Anybody have any thoughts or suggestions on the safety program? Thank you for that and the update and bringing it to our attention. And Whalers Lane, the request from the Commission on Disability for the new accessible space adjacent to White Heron Theater. Mr. Rowland, would you like to present this one?
Sure. It's a pretty simple request. We've had through the Commission on Disabilities a few requests to have a disabled space to access the White Heron Theater. There isn't anything, there are no disabled spaces terribly close by. So the thought was to put it as the first space on Whalers Lane. I can't, is Whalers two-way or one-way? I'm trying to look at the map at the moment, but does anybody know?
Whalers
it's
is two-way.
It's two-way. So, because the
It's
Google,
a careful two-way.
it's narrow. The image on the screen for Google Maps, Google Street View shows cars parked on the left side as you're going down toward the water. I mean, the objective would be to have that first space be the disabled parking space. So I don't know if there's a restriction for parking in a certain direction on that road. It doesn't look like it the way the cars are parked in this picture.
So I can tell you this somewhat, because sometimes people get ticketed. You are supposed to be parking facing towards North Water Street. I can't remember why. I know that Jerry Mack knows, but because it's a two-way street, some people park in the opposite direction. But during the summer, a lot of people get tickets for doing that. So it should be in the picture that's in your packet that shows the Jeep and the blue car facing North Water Street. That's the way they are supposed to go.
Right, you have to park in the direction of traffic flow in your lane and I mean, the regulations of the law might state it differently, but since it's, so if there was parking on the other side of the street, you'd have to park facing
The yacht club.
yeah, the yacht club. So that's the distinction there. Is there any further discussion regarding the establishment of another ADA space?
Does it matter that that road is marked as one of those, if it snows more than 2 inches, there's no parking so that snow plowing can happen? Does that have any bearing on that?
I can't imagine it does.
Okay, just wasn't sure.
Mr. Rowland, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the disabled parking space at that last space on Whalers Lane.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr. Sylvia, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Rowland,
Aye.
Mr. Burns,
Aye.
Chief Granson,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. Rowland. And that'll take us to number 10, Washington Street. We have a review to request a new crosswalk across Washington Street between numbers 66 and 68. And I see we have Mr. Wolf, who patiently waited through our meeting for this. I'm sorry, I probably should have advanced this. I hadn't realized that. But
No, it's been
Mr.
an
Wolf,
interesting conversation. Thank you very much. It's been good to listen to it.
Mr. Wolf, please, the floor is yours. If you'd
Thank
like
you.
to present your request.
Thank you. Let me see if I can do a screen share here. I put a couple things up. I think that this is it. Okay. All right. So I don't get to see the screen like you do, but
We can't see anything.
pardon me?
I can't see anything.
No,
I can't see anything. All right.
It's
Hold on.
black.
Am I permitted?
Yep.
Hold on. Everything's black.
Do you want me to put up the map that you provided?
Yeah, stand by a second. It seems like everything is mixed up on my machine right now. Hello? Okay, are we back?
How's that?
Yeah, there's a problem here with a connection. I'm not sure if it's me or what.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you now.
all right, we can't see the screen, so maybe we just go with.
Oh, you
Ms.
can't see
Williams.
mine?
No, right
I-
now, Mr. Wolf has control, so I think you have to, there we go. Now I can, whoa. We just saw it for a second. It was a big
Yep,
tease.
hold on. It says it's loading. There we go.
Okay, there we go. So go ahead, Mr. Wolf.
You're muted. You're muted, Chris.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so a couple things. Actually, I was thinking about raising my hand, but I decided to wait until now. In the safety action plan, the last panel that he showed, and let me just see if I can pull it up just so I can recall it verbally for you. And the last panel that he showed, which was called Intersection Crashes Severity Weighted Crash Frequency. In that, it's the picture of the island, and then it's got an inset of downtown area. There you go. Is that it? Okay, yeah, you gotta scroll down further. I think it's at the end of his presentation. Keep going. A little further, please. Okay, this is it. So it talks about, this 5.1 to 10 right there. And then if you can't see my cursor, but if you were to zoom in on where it says Union Street, right there, yeah, that's the corner of Francis and Washington Street. And that's basically the area that we're talking about. If we flip back now to my email. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me move the I got everyone's pictures there. Okay, so all right, so what we have here, I have as explained in the letter, we've experienced we renovated the what we call Cuddy, which is right next to Puddin, and I'm not sure if Mr. Sylvia is Ray Sylvia your dad?
Yeah,
Okay, so actually you guys owned Puddin about 80 years ago.
nope. No, different, be a different Sylvia, yeah.
Okay, well, I thought that was a picture of Ray when he was 4 years old next to his mother. Anyway, so Cuddy, we renovated Cuddy this past year to make some space for us to enjoy on the harbor. And yeah, as we all know, Washington Street can be a bit of a raceway. And what we experienced this year was that there is no tolerance between the drivers. I should say, there's little tolerance between the drivers and having enough patience to be able to let people cross the street. It's not much of a concern for, those of us who are young enough to be able to move easily. But anybody who is over the age of 75, it becomes a significant risk. And we had a number of instances where the drivers were challenging us, and as I indicated, the choice of words was rather rude in terms of go and use the crosswalk, and as you can see, the closest crosswalk is over 300 feet away. That not even there. That one, if you were to walk
Oh,
from
here.
where we are, 300 feet is over by the town offices, and then in the other direction, there isn't one on Washington Street Extension, and then you'd have to cross there and then loop back and so forth to try to get to Mater Street, which is where we typically park. So it represents a significant risk. And what I've actually had to do was I ended up not sure if this will come in, if it'll show. Let's see if it shows. Buying this security sign so I can turn it on and try to get something to get people's attention. Because when you turn on your cell phone, you flash your cell phone, your backlight and so forth to try to let people know that you're there. It's coming out of Francis Street. They tend to be polite and will allow you to cross. Coming out of town, they probably have a bit too much to drink and they're a little bit too aggressive. And and I just thought it was interesting when I saw this, this intersection crashes severity and so forth, and that points at that intersection, which is only about 50 feet away, 50, 75 feet away. So I'm asking for some help. I'm trying to prevent the possibility of somebody being injured. I'm trying to create a request that people have the ability to access the land bank land, which is immediately next door, and be able to provide at least an opportunity for people to be safe, especially in twilight or evening hours when visibility is diminished.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Mr. Burns?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did do some outreach to the land bank since they are in a butter, and there is a Francis Street Beach project that's in design right now. And they're actually recommending that the crosswalk be more at the Francis Street and Washington Street intersection, the east side of that intersection. And since it's a butter, it does appear that there would be some pedestrian access on the Francis Street Beach project to get to that crosswalk safely. Right now, in an existing condition, there's not much of a shoulder there to navigate over. So that would be, I think, some amenities provided to make that more accessible. but this might be a bit premature to be discussing this, and I'd want to do it within the scope of what improvements are planned by the land bank.
Thank you. Mr. Patno?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to actually say the exact same thing as Mike, but I did have a meeting on site on Washington at Francis with the land bank just a couple weeks ago. Especially since they've moved the house. I have it up on Street View, but
Number 70.
thank you. So they moved number 70, and there are longer term plans for that whole area in the interim. I believe the plan is to kind of restore the beach grass and not do too much with the area. But we did discuss adding a crosswalk from the existing ramp on the corner that was widened in the last couple of years. So there is a crosswalk that crosses Francis, and then from that same ramp, it would then cross Washington. I was supportive
Right,
of
so would it
that.
be here, kind of like where the stop bar is?
No, it'd be on the
here?
other side.
Here.
Yeah, right about there, exactly. And I do prefer that to a crosswalk further down. I don't really support the idea of one at like the highlighted location on the agenda and one at the intersection. I think that's a little bit too cluttered. But additionally, having a crosswalk closer to the intersection, I think, is a lot safer for vehicles that are turning. One personal location or one location that personally agitates me is the crosswalk on Surfside. That's I don't know, 200 feet north of Bartlett Road. Because when vehicles are queuing up, it's tough for vehicles that turn onto Surfside to see people that are already like in the crosswalk and crossing the road. So I'd prefer it be as close to the intersection as possible. It makes it a lot easier for vehicles in all three directions to navigate pedestrians crossing the road. So I was supportive of that. But again, like Mike said, it's kind of in its infancy. Nothing's really been set in stone as far as that plan. But that's where I'd prefer to see a crosswalk to get people over to the harbor from the other side of Washington Street.
Thank you, Mr. Patno. Anybody else, any comments on this?
Could I just ask a point of clarification?
Wolf, let me
Yes, sir.
just go through the committee first, and then we'll
What?
come back to you.
Yes,
Thanks.
sir.
Just
Yep,
get
thank
everybody
you.
out there. Any other work group members have anything? I just wanted to add that I would prefer the crosswalk at the intersection, though I had met out here before the intersection improvements happened. And I think what we should look at is whether it would go, and this is where I think you need just a bit more study, should it occur a little bit further to the west? So it's essentially the shorter, right? Like right where the curve, maybe not quite that far, right? But essentially where the width of the road starts to change, so that the pedestrian time in the road or the length of the traverse is as short as possible, as opposed to straight across. That's my only other. And but I think that has to be weighed with, if it was straight across, the people that are taking the left, the visibility. I don't know, but I think I'd want to study that a little bit. But I think in that general location would be preferable to where it's proposed. That's just my sense of things. Mr. Patno, is your hand still? Did you want to speak again? Yeah, okay. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm very encouraged by what you're suggesting. Whether obviously it's easiest for us if it's in the location that it's drawn, but if it's on the other side of 68 where 70 used to sit, that's certainly satisfactory as well. With 70 gone, the transition from our property into an area that's safe to walk along the side of the road is good. What I found from my own observations is that people coming out of Francis Street, they've already stopped, they make the turn, they see somebody's trying to cross the road, they still stop. They stop again. And so people are generally more courteous and so forth, and permissible to allowing you to cross. The issue is people coming from in town, departing on Washington Street. They seem to be in a hurry, and And that's really the area that's generated the concern for us, just from our observations and the way people behave and the way that they voice their dissatisfaction with somebody trying to cross the road. So,
Understood.
thank you.
Thank you. So it seems
Question?
that, yes, go ahead, Ms. Mooney.
I know that the new land bank crosswalk location that Mike and Drew and Art talked about, is something kind of down the road a little bit. Is putting in a crosswalk for this summer something that the work group would recommend, even if it was just using, not using the thermoplastic and just using something that's, might not be so permanent until the land bank finalizes its plan.
Anyone? Go ahead, Mr. Patno.
Considering the land bank has a longer term plan for that area that will take a lot of design, construction, permitting, all that stuff. Again, in the interim, the plan is basically just to reestablish the beach grass between the water's edge and the road. And when I was out there, I discussed that, that crosswalk that crosses Francis and ends at the handicap ramp, because of where that is and the crosswalk that would cross Washington that we're discussing. Basically, that area is kind of set in stone, and I asked that they take that location into consideration when planting the grass and creating the walkway, the path, if you will, from the asphalt road out to the edge of the water. So I think that basically they should be designing around the crosswalk, not vice versa, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what I had asked of them when we had our site visit.
So you don't think a temporary crosswalk until they get their stuff
No.
figured out, which could be years?
Right. I think we could go do the crosswalk now, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Where we
and
want.
ask them that the crosswalk is there for safety reasons and thus design around access, not
Right.
vice versa. We're not going to put our crosswalk based on what you want to build. You should, take the crosswalk into consideration. So establish the crosswalk first, and then they adapt to that. I think it's probably the better way to go about it.
That's what I think. I think we just need to decide the exact alignment, like what from, your perspective and perhaps Mr. Burns, whether, which exact position close, it seems the consensus amongst the work group is, that, it would go, at the intersection and not quite where, as proposed, suggested by Mr. Wolf, but, where exactly it goes. I mean, my sense would be that the work group could support a recommendation for a crosswalk with the exact location to be determined by the DPW and the transportation planner.
Well, there's already an accessible ramp in the sidewalk right
Yeah,
now.
right. I mean, that's
You would
what
kind
makes
of think
sense.
it would be here across.
That's what he's gonna be careful of the curve.
Yeah, and to Mr. Chair's point, the benefit of using that location is it's not exactly on the short or narrowest part of Washington, but it's very close to it.
Right.
If that ramp was further around the corner on Washington, then I get your point. You're going a lot further in this proposed crosswalk. But fortunately, it was where that was installed is pretty pretty fitting for this application.
So is there perhaps simply a motion to support a crosswalk at at the intersection of Washington and Francis would do it, and you guys could place it as it should, be placed, probably just right at that panel, really. The detectable panel.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Sorry, who seconded that? Was it?
Mike Burns.
Oh, Mike, thanks.
Mr. Rowland, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Burns,
Aye.
Mr. Patno, Mr. Sylvia, still with us? I can't.
Aye.
Thank you. And the chair votes, Chief Cranston,
Aye.
the chair votes aye. Thank you, Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, this
Appreciate it.
committee. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Chris,
take care.
just so you know, as Art noted at the beginning of the meeting, this group is advisory to the town manager, so these recommendations will be brought to her. And if she's okay with it, then we'll go forward with the DBW for installation.
Thank you very much.
That moves us on. Any other business not reasonably anticipated?
Okay,
Yes.
I have something.
Okay.
And I apologize, and I know everybody wants to get out of here. So something came to the town administration office, and it was taxi related. And they want to do some regulation changes, and I dropped the ball until yesterday on really reviewing the request. And part of the request was to increase the taxi and tour area on Straight Wharf by the High Line by 2 more spaces. And I know this is coming at you at the last minute. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. But I just wanted to get an idea of what this board might think of this. So here, this is, what is it called? Oh,
New well.
New Whale, thank you. Basically from right about the crosswalk to right around here is the taxi and tour vehicle parking, obviously this. And then they want 2 more spaces up by the courtyard. And I know that you all had reviewed a request from the Uber drivers, I think, last year, who wanted Uber driver parking, and it wasn't recommended. There was no representation. But again, this is something that's going forward to the select board. And I didn't know if you wanted to weigh in on it. And I wasn't anticipating this, didn't discuss it with the chair. It's not reasonably anticipated.
I think we would need to have this on an agenda for the taxis. If we were gonna really address this. I mean, I could tell you I'm not inclined, but I don't want to make a final determination. And I don't know if that
Well,
messes.
I can put it on the next agenda if you'd like. I will note that your next meeting is scheduled for April 18th, which is during school vacation week. I know I won't be here.
I won't be here.
We might want to discuss pushing that meeting out or
We do
having
May.
it a week early.
Can we all agree now to just go to May?
Just so you know, the traffic, we can, well, yeah, whatever. The taxi stuff is gonna go for a public hearing on May 1st.
So maybe we just
But
can't.
that's just for the regulations. The regulations, this doesn't have to be with that. This can be a separate discussion with the select board. I was
Right.
kind of hoping to do it all at the same time. And again, this was my oversight. Or you could change your meeting date to either April 11th or April 25th.
I think we just go to May if that's the only item we have. And that would be taken up separately. Unless everyone feels differently. I mean, if it's.
Anyone have any thoughts?
Everybody all right with that? I mean, are you overly concerned with that, Ms. Mooney? That
No.
Okay, if that works for you and everybody else, I think we just look at the meeting in May and hold off on the April meeting. And that way, if anything does come in, at least you know now, so that you can let anybody know. if something incredibly urgent comes up or the town manager needs something, then we could schedule another meeting, but.
Okay, so May would be May 16th.
Yes,
Everybody good with that?
okay. Thank you, everybody. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Made and seconded, Mr. Sylvia,
Aye.
Mr. Rowland,
Aye.
Mr. Burns, Chief Granson,
Aye.
votes aye, and thank you all, and we'll see you in May. Take care.
Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Chair.
Thanks.